friendship, simpatico, reconciled. I'm searching for the correct word to describe a good relationship between God and his people. The kind of relationship I had with him. It's beyond words.
When God commanded Abraham to leave his homeland and relatives to go to an unfamiliar land, Abraham had to create and follow a new set of guidelines for making his decisions.
The ancient father of three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. That's me, Father Abraham. Quite an accomplishment for nobody from Iraq, modern Iraq. About 4,000 years ago, it was Babylon. You can read all about it, all the things I did in the book of Genesis. But if you want to understand my thinking, you will need to read the books of Romans and Hebrews. About 5 centuries after my death, Joshua proclaims that my father and my ancestors worship other gods while we live beyond the Euphrates River. Growing up, my family worships many gods. Life is difficult and dangerous. We worship all these gods in an effort to survive. We worship them in an effort to thrive. Gods of weather, gods of nature, even made-up gods, just in case we miss one. You can't afford to overlook any god because you can't afford to make an enemy of any god. God, the God of the Bible, is just one of the many gods we worship. The Bible doesn't give details, but God comes to give me a very personal, direct commandment. Leave my home and go to an unknown place he will lead me to. That's what he tells me. He also tells me he will make my family into a great nation. He will bless me, and all the nations on earth will be blessed through me. A quandary for sure. Should I go all in with God, or should I stay where I am and do the things my family has always done? After all, to my culture, God, capital G, is one of all the many gods, lowercase g. Tempting to stay. Life's difficult and dangerous enough already. The deciding factor? My wife and I are childless. Aging quickly is sugarcoating it. We're really old. In fact, she's way past childbearing age. That said, the gods I've been worshiping haven't given me a child. The choice I make now will determine how my life goes from here on out. I'm very well aware of that. After days of soul-searching, I become fully persuaded of 3 principles. 3 principles that will guide me and my descendants. 3 principles as recorded in the book of Romans and Hebrews. The one true God exists, and he blesses those who seek to follow him, those who are his people. God has the power to do what he says he will do. Faith is when you act in accordance with what you believe. I'm going all in, 100%. No turning back, it's all God all the time. I pack up the entire family and all of our possessions and head south. God will give me more details. I hope. Soon. But there's a big problem. Something we always seem to realize over time. There's always a big problem. I begin to understand the big problem, not just my problem, not even just your problem, but the problem for all humans, our big problem. God made us in his image. That's not the problem. He wants to have a relationship with us. That's not the problem. We continually separate ourselves from him by our actions. That is the problem. The fallout? We can only have a close relationship with him if we fully obey him and trust him, and few seem willing to do so. I have an epiphany. God is giving me the opportunity to be the one person of my era who will have complete faith in him. I'll never be perfect, of course, but if I have complete faith, mistakes can be forgiven. This is something new for me. In my many gods reality, I come to believe that there's nothing more important than belonging to God. I've never felt this about my other gods. Theirs is a transactional agreement. I do this, they do that, but maybe they won't if they don't feel like it. And they're mad, and you'd better watch it, so go sacrifice something. And who knows, certainly humans do not. No, that's not this God. He will be my God. I will belong to him. A relationship. As part of that relationship, I get to be God's friend. Sounds too good to be true. So simple. Again, something we realize over time. Simple is not always easy. My wife, Sarai, my beautiful wife, Sarai, gets impatient. That's a little harsh. We've been living in this new land, Canaan, 10 years. And I am in my late 80s, still no children. Sarai's long past childbearing age. She takes matters into her own hands, and as is our custom, urges me to sleep with her Egyptian slave. This will guarantee an heir rather than no heir. Instead of continuing to trust God, I follow the cultural solution at my wife's direction. Her Egyptian slave Hagar becomes pregnant, and I'm on the way to having a son. That's the good news. The bad news? It's not the son God has planned for me. In my unfaithfulness, I've disobeyed God. But I belong to him, so God chooses to forgive me and to keep his promises to me through another son. Somehow God is able to work all things to the good for those who love him. Ishmael, my first son, a little wild, but a desert-born boy. What do you expect? 14 years later, my wife, who now goes by Sarah, miraculously bears our son Isaac, one through whom God will fulfill his promises to me. To keep peace in my family, I send Hagar and Ishmael away. What's he going to think? His brother is born. He loses his inheritance and blessing because of it. Those are the seeds of family feuds that are never resolved. In the next dozen or so years, life has its ups and downs for our family. God continues to bless us materially, and I become wealthy and powerful as many of the local kings. I pass 110. It's apparent that God will fulfill his promises to me through Isaac and his descendants, but not in my lifetime. I'm hugely overprotective of Isaac. A lot is riding on him, and I think I need to help God. God may need my help. God alone cannot take care of him. This is why my next conversation with God brings my whole world crashing down around me. Abraham, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. How can this be? This can't be. I know for a fact that God hates human sacrifices. I know he will fulfill his promises through my son Isaac. My head spins. What am I missing? I load my donkey and set out with Isaac and the 2 servants for the region of Moriah. I hide my tears. They think it's strange that I stop to cut firewood. 3 days later, we arrived near Moriah. So confused and overwhelmed, I tie the donkeys and go for a long walk. The 3 principles spring to mind. 3 true principles I've lived by for decades. God exists, and he blesses those who seek to follow him, those who are his people. God has the power to do what he says he will do. And faith is when you act in accordance with what you believe. I rack my brain. I think. I reason. I smile. I've reasoned it out. I will sacrifice Isaac. Then God will raise him from the dead. Simple. True. Nobody's ever been raised from the dead. But I know God has the power to do what he says he will do, and that's the only way it can happen. I return to the servants. I tell them that Isaac and I are going to go worship God, then we will return. Isaac carries the wood. I carry a knife in the fire. I'm fully prepared to sacrifice Isaac. Isaac asks, "Where's the sacrifice?" I tell him God will provide. You probably know the rest of the story. We reach the place where God has told me to go. I prepare the altar and I place the wood on it. I bind Isaac with a rope and place him on the altar. I raise my knife to kill him. "Abraham, Abraham!" The angel of the Lord stops me. "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Then God reaffirms his promises to me. 2,000 years after me, on the same mountain, a parallel event, God sacrifices his own son, his only son, whom he loves, so that all mankind can have the right to be called God's people if they choose to follow him. Romans and Hebrews clue you into the principles by which I live my life faithfully. In the book of James, the Apostle James uses my willingness to sacrifice Isaac as an example of being righteous. He writes that faith without deeds is useless, that my faith and actions together made my faith complete. Echoing a chapter in Genesis, chapter 15, verse 6. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And then, the part for me that is just so beyond words, and he was called God's